All right, everybody, welcome. I will call our meeting to order here at 1:03 p.m. and start by acknowledging with gratitude and starting in a good way that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory, the Squamish Nation, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Quellaveam, Bowen Island. And welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, September 25th, 2023. And thank you for joining, either here in person or online. My name is Andrew Leonard, and I'm the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. As I always do, I'd like to introduce the other elected members of our council today. And I will start on my right this time with Councillor Sue Ellen Fast. Her left is Councillor Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor John Saunders. His right, Councillor Tim Wake. And to his right, Councillor Alison Morse. We're also joined by members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, and other staff who may be presenting items here today. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during either the public comment section or the question and answer period of the meeting, your presence will be recorded in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca or on our YouTube channel now. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens here. And I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments during the public comment section or the question and answer period to myself. For anyone following online or YouTube, our full agenda package is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. With that, I will look to the corporate officer for the introduction of any late items this afternoon.
Yes, there were just 3 additional letters that came in over the weekend regarding the proposed regional park for camping at Cape Roger Curtis, and those are included in your on-table items.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I will look for an approval of the agenda and the late items. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Video now and mute.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Oh, and I totally forgot to introduce Councillor Alex Jurgensen is online with us today by Zoom. So we do have a full complement of councillors here. Moving on to item 2, public comments. I'll look to the corporate officer for any public comments.
There are no registered public comments per time. So, wow.
Had a schedule already. Okay. There are no delegations this afternoon. And item 4, consent agenda. I'll look to councillors for anyone that wishes to pull items from the consent agenda. Councillor Getty?
I'd like to pull 3.3, 12.4, and 12.5.
3.3, 12.4, 12.5. Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to pull items? I'm going to pull 12.1 just for comment. And with that,
Did you say 12.1?
12.1, yeah. With that, I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast still has her hand up. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Video now
Opposed?
and mute.
And that carries unanimously. Looking at items that have been pulled from the consent agenda, 3.3, over to you, Councillor Getty.
All right, so 3.3 are the minutes of the special meeting that council held with respect to the Heritage Project in David's Orchard and I believe the tax sale. With respect to the Heritage Project, included in that are the minutes of the Heritage Commission that occurred on September the 6th, and attached to that, buried in that, is a letter that was received after that meeting from Metro. And I would like that letter to specifically be referred to the Heritage Commission. It answers some of the discussion that was in that special, or the meeting of the Heritage Commission, and I think that there's an response that needs to be sent to Metro about that. And I can go into that in more detail if you'd like.
Okay, so it's just a motion to refer a letter within those minutes. So motion to refer the letter from Metro Vancouver.
It's attached to the minutes, but I'd like to specifically.
And being referred to the Heritage Commission. Right. Is there a second for that?
Is it for information or for comment or for response?
Response.
Response.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, is there a seconder for that referral? By Councillor Wake. And any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Morris.
The minutes that are in our agenda package don't have any attachment.
There's a link to that.
Sorry? I
I
know,
think there's a link.
I had read it and I couldn't find it, and I asked our corporate officer and she sent me the, I guess the updated minutes, were they last minute edition or something?
Yes, that was the agenda, actually.
The agenda, not the
Agenda of
minutes.
that meeting, so it's a late item. So we added it to the agenda as a late item and it was published with that agenda.
Okay,
Oh, so it should be the agenda, not the minutes then that gets referred?
all right.
Sure, but the motion is just to refer the
Yeah.
letter, which I think,
Yeah.
and the corporate, you know which letter is being referred to?
Yes.
Okay, so that we can do that, and then we'll just have a motion to receive or to adopt the minutes of 3.3.
I have a question.
Yes.
When we refer to them, to the committee for response, does that imply that the committee is going to begin writing to Metro Vancouver? Or do we want to say recommendations for a response?
Recommendations to council?
No, so the way that I interpret response, because we're making the referral and we're asking the committee for a response, it's a response to council on that letter.
Okay,
Would it hurt to just put that in the resolution so it's clear that it's a
Sorry?
response? Would it hurt to put that in the resolution so it says respond to council?
Sure. I
that'd be
mean,
great. Sometimes people look at these 5 years later and wonder, where is that?
is there any objection to adding to council at the end of that?
No.
That carries by unanimous consent. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries.
Just for clarity, is somebody going to send us the letter that's being referred to? I think I found one by tracking through all the exhibits and stuff, but I want to make sure it's the same letter.
Yes, and it would come back to us from the next Heritage Commission meeting anyways, given that it's the referral. And then just a quick motion to, I'll look to council for a quick motion that the minutes of the special council meeting held September 15th, 2023 be adopted. We haven't done that one yet. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Getty, moving on to item 12.4, which is the Islands Trust Quarterly Media Monitoring Report.
I just wanted to pull this for information. I'm not sure if people take any time to read it, but I think that a lot of the articles that are undercurrent that are of interest appear on that. And this is a service that the trust provides in terms of tracking and highlighting all sorts of articles from Seattle and all the other Gulf Islands and a couple of ours. So I just wanted to bring it up and highlight it, that this is a good service that if people don't know about it, I recommend it.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion to receive. Item 12.4, moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And item 12.5, Inspector Robert Dykstra's Sea to Sky RCMP Strategic Plan 2023 to 2028. Councillor Getty.
I don't have any comments or complaints or additions to the reporting on Bowen Island, but I would remind our constable that this was a town hall that the RCMP called. There was no publicity, there was very little turnout, and I would encourage them to, although it's a really nice graphic that they did of Bowen Island community, I think that we need to reinforce that it is a community that wants to participate, and it would be really, really helpful with all of the changes that are potentially coming down the pike, that they, I suppose the only criticism would make more effort to make sure that the community is more involved.
Okay. Thank you. Any other further questions or comments from council on this item?
Just to comment on that, I completely agree with Councillor Getty. But in addition to that, at our meetings last week at the convention, we were able to meet ministers group and in a policy session with everybody that's overseeing changes in policing moving forward. I can't remember the name of the report, but in any event, at that point, we did make our intentions known that we'd like to be more involved. And so I'm not taking anything away from Councillor Getty said we are moving down that track and we need to be aggressive in doing so, I think.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, I'll look to council for a motion to receive. Item 12.5, moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Item 12.1 is just an item that I'd like to highlight for both council and community. It is the quarterly action tracking report dated September 18th, 2023. And what this has come out of conversations that I've had with both our CAO and our corporate officer as a means of reporting to council and community the outstanding work that council has directed to staff. So within this report, you'll see motions that we've made, motions that are in progress, the status of them, and what's being worked on. And the anticipation is that these reports will come up quarterly so that both as council and then, by extension, community will be able to see and know and have a sense of where all of these items are at any given time. With that, I will move to receive item 12.1, seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and that carries. Moving on to item 7.1 under bylaws, 7.1 request for direction to draft permissive tax exemption bylaw 2024-2027. I will hand it over to our CFO.
Thank you. Through the chair to the rest of council, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the permissive tax exemption bylaw, the process that it goes through and what impacts it has on our community. Typically, our council in the past has adopted one bylaw at the beginning of their term, and it's in effect for the entire length of their term. Permissive tax exemption applications are onerous. There's a lot of information that's asked from applicants. And by extending the exemption for the entire term of the council, it allows the applicants to focus on their service delivery as reducing some of the administrative burden. And each year, what they do instead of filling out a complete application is they send to me a letter. It includes their financial information for the year and a letter from their board that just states that the conditions that existed for the initial application are still in effect and we continue on as we were. So it's a way to ensure that there's still that measure of accountability for organizations, but a way to decrease the administrative burden on these groups. A permissive tax exemption is one of the tools that council has to provide assistance, direct financial assistance to organizations in their community that are delivering services that are of benefit to the general public. They are a very interesting and important tool because not only are you exempting the organizations from the burden of paying municipal taxes, but by adopting a permissive tax exemption, you're also relieving these organizations of paying all of the school taxes and police taxes and all of the other taxing authorities that go with it. So they're very effective and very powerful tools that council can use to provide direct financial support to organizations in the community. In the report on the last page, it provides a list of all of the organizations that have in the past received and are proposed to be received a permissive tax exemption with the new bylaw. It's a statutory bylaw that has to be approved by council before October 31st of any given year, and then it becomes effective for the following year's taxation roll. So we'll be reviewing a permissive tax exemption in October, and it will take effect for January 1st of next year. Just wanted to take this opportunity as a council. Certainly it is your right to provide direction, to provide different direction to me, to draft something that is different from what we have done in the past. I do want to make the point that these organizations that have received them in the past, they tend to rely on them because they've become quite dependent on that financial assistance. So to all of a sudden in 1 year, suddenly take that away, that would be a very, very significant financial shock for any of these organizations. So if there was some consideration being given to change the direction that we have gone in the past, then I would certainly recommend that that be done on a gradual basis. It be implemented with a significant amount of notice and some consultation. I am suggesting that that council should continue to go forward and make no changes to the permissive tax exemption bylaw process that has been done in the past, and make no changes to the organizations that have qualified and are continuing to apply for the upcoming 4 years. I do have one group on here that I just put in as a sort of as a just a placeholder, and it's the Bowen Island Memorial Garden Society. There was some question in a couple of years whether or not they had been provided with a permissive tax exemption. It was a bit of a back and forth conversation with Metro Vancouver. They lease space on Metro Vancouver land to provide a public garden for memorials and memorializing people and their loved ones. So that lease does not create a taxable assessment, and there is no taxable assessment or taxes generated from the use of the memorial gardens space on that land. So that will be coming off. We don't need to do anything there. And I think the same with the library. I hadn't quite finished my conversations with with BC Assessment at the time I produced this report. So when it comes forward, if council directs to go forth as we were with no changes, then it will look a little bit different than what we have here, but just in respect of those two small requests. It does require statutory notice, so it does need to be advertised in 2 editions of the undercurrent before the bylaw is adopted, and it does need to be adopted by October 31st. And the one significant change this year is that I'm suggesting that it go 4 years instead of 3 years, which is what the policy says. And that is, of course, to align with the 4-year council term. The policy was drafted with the term going 3 years. I think that's all I had. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wake and Councillor Saunders.
Through the chair. So I read through the permissive tax exemption policy, and I noted that it cannot apply to any residents. And I'm trying to think forward here about affordable housing on Bowen and nonprofit organizations that may be creating it. And as we're all learning, and we just echoed loudly at UBCM, it's getting harder and harder to produce these projects and have them be affordable. So I wonder if there's any merit in having a discussion about the possibility of adding, or actually of just changing that policy so that it didn't exclude residences, or that it did include or nonprofit housing organizations would be exempted.
Yeah, certainly. I think if and when we have that situation where we have a nonprofit operating an affordable housing society, we would have to definitely review the policy and consider changes that we may need to make in order to continue to provide tax relief to a not-for-profit operating in that context. There never was a permissive tax exemption. When it was done, there was a lot of consultation, and one piece that we heard was, it seems fair that if there is a residential component to a piece of property that's owned by a not-for-profit, that there be some recognition that there is a benefit to the person living there, that they should make some contribution as well. So you can see that there is, even in the policy, there's a formula which provides for a calculation to take a tiny percentage of the overall property, account for the piece that is attributable to a caretaker or a custodian that lives on site, and have the organization pay some property taxes on behalf of that very small percentage of the overall property value. That was particularly in respect of Rivendell and the Camp Beauwile properties. I think an affordable housing project is a completely different scenario, and we would have to completely look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and make changes at that point. This bylaw, it's in effect for 4 years. From time to time, there are new properties that come up within the term. For example, last council term, the Conservancy properties came up and were added midstream, as was the health center. So it's not locked. It just tries to minimize the amount of workload for both the organizations and staff as well. And if there's something that needs to be changed halfway through, we can always amend it. It's not locked in.
Thank you.
Councillor Svanes, then Councillor Fast.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for this. If we get just a bit of clarity on the table you have at the end of your package there. It seems fairly straightforward, but just a question about the other authority taxes. Are we responsible for negotiating with those other authorities or with the Islands Trust or, the other things, the other taxes that are being exempted here? Do you have to negotiate that, or is that sort of automatically included when the municipality does this? And regardless of that $57,000 for other authorities, do we have to make that up, or have they just agreed you don't have to pay it?
Yeah, correct. If the property is exempt, it's removed from the roll, so it becomes removed from the taxable assessment that we then apply those other authorities' tax rates to. There are two government bodies that we deal with, one being Metro Van, one being Islands Trust, that don't send us tax rates each year. They send us a bill. So they send us a bill for $900,000. But $900,000. So in the case of Metro Vancouver and Islands Trust, effectively those costs do get redistributed to all of the other taxpayers because the bill stays the same whether we spread it over 2,000 properties or we spread it over 1,999. So effectively with those two entities, they do, but it's just because of the difference in the way that they send us a request for payment each year. School taxes, police taxes, BC assessment taxes, they just send us rates and we just apply those rates to taxable properties collected on their behalf and send them a check.
So you just don't collect it?
We don't collect it from exempt.
Thank you.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Regarding the question that Councillor Wake asked about affordable housing, I'm wondering, I don't see Snug Cove House on here. Do they have another name, or is it something that would happen when and if they build something?
Yes, because the way that the legislation is worded, the charity or the organization has to actively be using their asset to deliver services. And because it's been sort of
Vacant land.
Vacant land. What council did in past years was provide them with a grant in the amount of their taxes that would offset the cost of taxes to them. But unless that asset is actively being used to deliver the services to the community, they can't ask for tax exemption for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the CFO? I will look for a motion of disposition then from council. Councillor Getty?
Is it just received for information?
Staff to do that.
Council direct the chief financial officer to draft a permissive tax exemption bylaw to be effective for the period 2024 to 2027, which includes properties outlined in attachment 2 of the report dated September 12th, 2023, as amended.
Yeah.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Councillor Fast?
Second.
Oh, second. I had Councillor Wake. Like saying that.
I missed.
No problem. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Moving on to section 8, staff reports. 8.1, update on status of the Metro Vancouver application for a proposed regional park with camping at Cape Breton Curtis. Turn it over to our Manager of Planning, Daniel Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard. While I start my presentation, I just want to take a minute and introduce council to the newest member of our planning department. So sitting with me is Sophia Redder. She joined us starting September 11th, so she attended the last council meeting as well, and I neglected to introduce her, but remember today she's here, and you will see her at some point presenting reports before you as well.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So in your agenda is a report on the Cape Roger Curtis rezoning application, just to provide council an update with some of the action in September. So as council recalls, in July, you directed staff to have a meeting with Metro Vancouver staff and available Squamish Nation staff to go over some of the concerns and some of the issues raised at the July 10th meeting of council. So in September, 2 meetings were actually held between Metro Vancouver and Bowen Island Municipality. So September 6th, Mayor Leonard and Councillor Tim Wake, as the director and alternate director of Metro Vancouver Board, met with Liam Edwards, our CAO, and senior Metro Vancouver staff and board members. And so the sort of the synopsis of that meeting is in the report, as is the results. September 13th, myself and our CAO and manager of Parks and the Environment met with Metro Vancouver staff to go over that specific list of conditions that was generated by council. And so Metro's responses to those items are included in your report. And then I'm just noting too, so September 11th, we received council direction to set up a scheduled meeting between council and the Islands Trust Executive Committee. And so what I just note in the report is, from staff's point of view, we've paused the referrals of these 2 rezoning bylaws until we've had that meeting, anticipating either potential amendments or other council direction before proceeding any further with these bylaws. So we're not doing the referrals to committees knowing that we'd be referring and discussing something that would likely change. So we would restart referrals once we have direction after that meeting. And so the recommendation for this report is just council receive this report for information, and then I'm flagging the alternative that's in the report, which is council giving explicit direction to staff essentially to not bring this rezoning application forward again until we've seen some amendments from Metro Vancouver to address concerns raised by the Islands Trust Executive Committee. So that's an alternative at this point. Or it may be that council would make a similar motion following the Islands Trust Executive Committee meeting when we have a more sort of concrete list of what we'd be looking to have changed. And then in your agenda as well as a letter from the Islands Trust Conservancy. It's there. I don't have it in my report, but it's there for council's information as well. So I'll stop sharing at this point and turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And just a note on the Bowen Island Conservancy letter. It was received on this end, as well as copied to Metro Vancouver. I had asked that it be included in this agenda as it speaks to some ongoing discussions. It influences the discussions that we had at Metro Vancouver at the September 6th meeting, and is a public announcement by the Conservancy of conversations that I originally introduced with Metro Vancouver back in March. And back in March, the original introduction was made to Metro Vancouver with the intention that the Conservancy had in the neighborhood of about $20 million of donations. They were simply seeking a potential partnership with Metro Vancouver. There was some conservation related amendments to the Metro Vancouver proposal that they were looking to make. My understanding was that even camping wasn't off the table at that period of time. And those discussions continued with Metro Vancouver, sort of out of our view, until this point. And I knew of the conversation made when Metro Vancouver leadership of Parks and Environment transferred over, so we've received this letter, that informs us as part of the process. Then we'll ultimately go to Metro Vancouver to discuss on their end, as the Conservancy is a nonprofit, a private organization separate from us, and that will be a matter between them and Metro. with that, I'll look to the floor for any questions or comments for the planner. Over to Councillor Getty.
I would like to put on the record that with respect to the letter from the Conservancy that was attached, that I'm very much in favor, and I'm playing my cards a little early in the whole process. I really like their proposal to Metro Van to share the responsibilities for the park. I find that the strength of Metro is in their the people that have, the ecologists that have gone out there and have been doing an inventory and have found, as I understand it, 2 additional endangered species. And that if we can partner with them, that would be, from my perspective, ideal in terms of what this community wants and can handle. I hope they take this seriously and consider it and bring something back to us to consider that is more in lines with that proposal. I think we've got obviously real problems in the community with respect to primarily the aspect of camping, but many of the others. And this protects some of that, the Hutzar Creek and the areas adjacent to their Wild West or whatever they call it, Wild Coast. If Metro's listening and if they are interested in pursuing this, then I, for one, council would be in favor of that part of that Conservancy proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Getty. Councillor Jurgensen.
Press CMD plus. I won't spend time rehashing what Councillor Getty said, but I definitely think that there's a really unique opportunity here to create something that can address a lot of the concerns, and just would encourage Metro Vancouver to pursue that further. Looks like you're done talking. Zoom us has.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Wick.
I concur with both Councillor Getty and Councillor Jurgensen. And to Councillor Getty's comment about I hope they're listening, I wonder if perhaps we should see if it is the will of council that we would prefer that.
Possibly, we're here. Anything goes. Just some comments from my seat here. I think one of the pieces that the community has been challenged with, and it comes out of, so just to recap the story so far for anybody that's watching, where we're at in the process is council's passed a first reading. We sent it to committees back in June. This group, our council, had a meeting regarding some of the ideas or conditions that we'd like to see from Metro Vancouver in order for the application to be successful or ultimately address the impacts that a project of this scale might have. That went further to our regular council meeting on July 10th, where we saw that motion that was in response to, I think, some of the technical reports that we saw out of Metro Vancouver, some of the ongoing issues and challenges that still remain to be unresolved, and asked for that collaborative meeting. Out of that, we saw the phase 2 of Metro Vancouver's engagement in the summer. And the phase 1 of engagement, as stated by Metro Vancouver, was intended to be a listen and learn, where listen to our community, learn what's happening, and that input was to feed forward into their overall park concept design that was unveiled in their phase 2. And we know in the summer, during the open houses, when phase 2 was unveiled, there was some dismay shared by myself that we didn't see any sort of changes to the underlying proposal or the park concept, which then led to me writing this email about the September 6th meeting to have both politicians and staff and senior staff from both sides come together and figure out, well, what are we going to do here? We know that our committee, that our council, that our community has raised many, many concerns. In that time, we also heard back from the Islands Trust that there were 10 points of the Islands Trust policy statement that the executive committee did not feel that the application was in compliance for. And ultimately, the question that we went to meeting with Metro Vancouver was, Okay, well, as the applicant for a development proposal and a rezoning proposal, what is it that you'd like to do? And I think the challenge, which has been well documented in the staff report put together by our Chief Administrative Officer and Manager of Planning, was that there did not seem to be an appetite to bring forward amendments or bring forward changes that would deal with some of the substantial or many of the substantial impacts that increasing tourism and visitation on the island would have. And I believe that's why, and I won't read too much into my fellow councillors' comments and take them at face value, but when there is an alternative proposed by a community organization to potentially take over that land and still maintain the conservation focus for it, that there is support there. And to be clear with the Conservancy's proposal, what I am not clear on, and I will certainly be asking my Metro Vancouver staff and colleagues, is how did a conversation about $20 million of community-based funding that could have been used to mitigate the impacts of this development proposal, how did that community funding get turned into a conversation about a sale of the land? Because that certainly did not have Metro Vancouver Board approval, nor did it have input from the Regional Parks Committee. And I think that's a fair question to ask. But in the interim, given that we do have this community-generated proposal, I think it's interesting, and I would very much be looking forward to the discussions at Metro Vancouver and the feedback that we have coming back from that proposal. Councillor Saunders and Councillor Fast.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. While I am contrarian by nature, it's hard not to agree with what I've heard, the last several speakers say. I mean, this just seems like a win-win given the divisiveness of this issue and the serious concerns that everybody's had and the way that, frankly, they really haven't been addressed yet, as you just stated. Further to what Councillor Wade said, I'm not really sure what that will of council might look like, but perhaps a letter from council saying, hey, we're aware of this and we think you should give it serious consideration indicates the will of council, if that indeed is the will of council. But something along those lines might be it at least states our position on this, that we think it's a good idea that's worth pursuing, particularly given the politics and everything else that's going on around this issue right now.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Fast.
Yeah, I'll speak in favor of that sort of motion. I not that it's a motion yet, but I like that idea because I'm looking at our official community plan's fundamental goals that were in the CFO's report just before this. It's great to see so much of our OCP showing up in agendas, by the way. It's helpful. I want to, it just reinforced for me how our role is to think about the island as a whole, not just that particular property and those particular users that may come to use the property for some of our fundamental goals are, number one, to preserve and protect the unique amenities and natural environment of Bowen Island for the benefit of everybody, to recognize the importance of and preserve marine-oriented community and island atmosphere. And there's lots of things like this, including recognize societal responsibilities for residents and visitors alike, to contribute to minimize Bowen Island's contribution to global climate change. And here we're looking at what looks like a lot of vehicles coming to Bowen and driving off. Land use pattern, which high priority social factors included, as well as environment. And I'll just skip down here to 11 to recognize Snug Cove as the commercial and community heart of Bowen Island and to provide the expansion of commercial, residential, and community and cultural uses that will contribute towards a pleasant, walkable village, appropriate in form and scale to a small community. These are all things I think that I've seen as being challenged by the current application that's in front of us. And yet these are the fundamental official community plan goals that we are charged to carry out by the community through this long-standing document, the OCP. And so I like Councillor Saunders' suggestion that we recognize the letter, we let Metro Vancouver, the applicant, know that we've read the letter and that we think it warrants consideration, careful consideration, and maybe attach our 12 fundamental goals from our OCP, because they kind of back up a lot of the other comments and things from the committees, Islands Trust, and the Bowen Island Conservancy's various letters up to this point to us and their offer to Metro Vancouver.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any first-time speakers before going to second round. Councillor Morse?
Well, just a curiosity question, because there's two offers from the Conservancy in this letter. But if camping were removed, I don't know whether planning staff has looked at this. If camping were removed, would all of the sections of the trust policy statement that the trust executive has raised be gone and not of concern? The community is also, I think, raising concern about just the number of people that would even use it as a day use park.
So I'll refer that question through to staff.
Through the chair, I guess my initial answer would be it depends. But I mean, I would say, we've said from the start, it's like our land use bylaw permits trails, permits nature protection, information boards and things of that nature. So if a park or conservancy at the Cape was operated on those terms, similar to the existing nature reserve operated by the conservancy, it wouldn't require a rezoning and so wouldn't require an amendment bylaw, so wouldn't trigger referral to the Islands Trust.
Just a couple of comments here from a process standpoint. So at the end of the day, this is really, and this is just the view from this seat here. This is an application for an OCP amendment and a rezoning. They're an applicant. They have their own process. The Islands Trust is weighed in. I would gravitate towards either just receiving this report for information or the alternative. And just in the spirit of letting Metro Vancouver have their own process in terms of deciding what they would like to do. We've communicated and they're well informed about the Islands Trust Executive Committee decision as well as the trust policy statement. They are well informed of the Conservancy's proposal. I understand that the Conservancy has applied to be a delegation in front of the Metro Parks the Regional Parks Committee. And insofar as our ability to stay out of their process a little bit and not get into any sticky situations, my preference would be either a motion to receive or a motion just to say, hey, you know what? The application isn't in compliance right now. As the applicant, it's with you. You can choose to bring it into compliance or you can negotiate with a third party or do whatever you like and just put the ball in their court and leave it at that. So, to give them as much of an open ocean to the process that they now have to navigate. Councillor Fast?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make the motion as recommended by staff, not the alternative, because I think we can always do the alternative later. As read at the beginning, pending the outcome of the meeting. So I'm just going to move, I agree with your point there, that move that council received the report dated September 15th, 2023, the update on status of the Metro Vancouver application for information.
Okay.
Just want to put the title in there so we can find it.
Sure. Moved. Second. Seconded by Councillor Morse. Discussion, Councillor Saunders.
Yeah, so my discussion point was back to my original point, which is why I had my hand up earlier before that motion. And thank you. And if you more or less answered what I was going to say with your comments. When I was talking about potentially sending a letter saying, we think this is a good idea, maybe I would certainly be willing to, while I don't mind that idea, I'd certainly be willing to defer to anyone with deeper knowledge of governmental process that is in fact a private land deal they're talking about between the Conservancy and Metro. And so, you know, if it's inappropriate for us to do something like that, I can certainly understand it. Still like the idea, but I can understand it. It's like, you really shouldn't be butting in here. We should stand back and let them have the process. So that's where I'm at with it.
Okay. Councilor Wake?
I thought your comments addressed the situation beautifully, and if they do get listened to by Metro, they're going to hear them that way. So I still don't think it would hurt in this same resolution to just express some support for our willingness to work with both the Conservancy and Metro.
Councilor Morris?
I think we should just keep it simple and move to receive it because we're already working with the Conservancy. We've got a memorandum of understanding and everything with them. So that's out in the open already. So I think we should just let their due processes unfold and just receive this for information.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously as Councillor Jurgensen has just stepped out for a little bit. Moving on to item 8.2, official community plan update, manager planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm here today to talk about the item in Council's strategic plan about evolving OCP. So Council is aware that 2011, Bowen adopted their OCP. This is following a multi-year progress overseen by an OCP steering committee. Councillor Fass will remember that the committee report. And so this council, in your strategic plan, had a key priority to evolve the OCP. So what staff have prepared and are presenting today, initial steps towards updating the OCP. And one of the things that we wanted to get from council was some idea of council's ideal scope of this project. So knowing how exactly they move forward. So what the report outlined were three sort of options of what people do when they review and they update their OCPs. So the first one would be what we're calling a targeted review. So this is essentially going through the existing OCP. It's reviewing existing policies and objectives. So it's identifying which ones are maybe some are completed, some are outdated, some have been supplanted, like directions to be recommending minor adjustments. It's work that's often marginally undertaken by staff. I did one of these when I was the planner in District of Kitimat, sort of that targeted review. It doesn't feature as much sort of consultation or steering committee work. Potentially it's like, the initial report is done and that goes for consultation in terms of this is what we think we're finding for this OCP review. Second option being a comprehensive review. So this would be more detailed analysis and assessment, quite a high level of public consultation. It may entail a restructuring of the OCP and large scale amendments to many of the sections and maps and stuff, but sort of the bias would be, we're keeping the format of the OCP the same, where maybe we're reviewing the fundamental goals to make sure that they still ring true to people on Bowen. Maybe we're reviewing the structure, but maybe it stays the same, so there'd still be a housing section of the OCP, and so we're working on that basis. And the third option being drafting a new OCP. So that's saying, okay, the 2011 OCP has served us, and now we're going to sort of start with a clean slate moving forward. And obviously, especially between those options 2 and 3, there is nuance. Like it's not a discrete category, but there's sort of a line of what can happen from there. And then, so in the report, I outlined sort of some of the factors in considering the scale of review that's necessary. And I think most pertinently, it's just those dates. It's like 2011, it was adopted. It's now 2023. It'll be 2024 or 2025 before something's adopted and the project is finished. So from that point of view, staff would be recommending option 2 or 3 that would sort of pass the point of that target review. Like that's maybe a 5 or 7 year review that you could do of your OCP to sort of check in how it's going. And this seems like, okay, enough time's passed. When you look at census data, like Bowen's had quite a large population turnover. It seems like more work and more consultation is needed for an OCP project. And then the other key sort of recommendation is that typically for OCP reviews, there's a steering committee involved, knowing that the work is sort of in-depth and lengthy enough that it's too much for council themselves to oversee the process. You don't want like every council meeting to become an OCP process meeting, but a steering committee is needed. And sort of with that too, it's like it's beyond staff. Like it's not necessarily for, me and other senior staff to say this is what we feel is the appropriate consultation, but it needs that steering committee people in the community from a wide range within the community to provide that guidance. So from that point of view, it's assuming council agrees with staff, sort of an option 2 or 3. Initial tasks would be drafting, approving terms of reference, and then advertising and appointing the OCP steering committee. And then the steering committee, when they're formed, would provide that guidance into the review process. So looking at how it's going to work, what the scope would be, selection of consultants, and what range of consultants work is needed, how the public consultation will look. And then just a slide just in terms of reference. What are some key questions in a terms of reference? And I've included in the report the 2011 terms of reference and I think 1 or 2 other examples. But what's the mandate of that committee? Often the key question, so number of members and the composition of members. So often you'll see it's not just saying, like many of our committees sort of say this many people, the general public. But often it's more targeted. It's wanting to know that we want to make sure these different sectors of the community are represented on this steering committee. So it might be that the terms of reference actually identifies those things. And then relationship of steering committee to council. Council and staff. So knowing, okay, what's the committee's role, what's staff's role, at what point does it come to council? What is council weighing in on? Some of those can be defined in the terms of reference or may sort of evolve through the process. So the recommendation is just the council direct staff to draft a terms of reference for an official community plan steering committee based on a scope of review as selected by council at this meeting.
Thank you. Questions for the planner? Councillor Fast?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this. I'm delighted to see it in front of us. I have a couple of questions. One of them is on the first page. It refers to UCLUET, who utilize students from a university to drive the OCP process. I don't remember any students being involved in the last time we did this OCP, our Bowen one. So I'm just wondering what that is in reference to, or?
Oh, sorry. So that would have been reference to sort of the review of what other OCP, looking at what other.
I'm reading it wrong then? Okay.
I was just saying they were one of the only communities we could find that didn't have a steering committee that guided our process, and instead they used this VIE.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. And then I'm just into comments, but one other question I'm wondering about this idea of council members on the steering committee. Is that what staff's thinking initially? Because we didn't have that before. It lets the steering committee be independent of council. Often us councillors have strong points of view. And so this allows the steering committee to kind of be independent. But I don't know if there's a change or is there a specific reason?
Through the chair, I mean, I guess ultimately I'd be guided by council. I think I had considered just as a default that council members would be on, like our other committees. But that would be, definitely take council's guidance. And it could be that either there are councillors on as members or there are councillors on as, like the APC, there is like a liaison role. And so that could be council could.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I just wondered if the rules had changed or something like that. That's my second question.
Just a comment from our CAO, and then Councillor Morris and Councillor.
I guess if it is a committee of council, there has to be at least one council member on it.
Well, advisory committees and, select committees and standing committees, so it would be a select committee.
Select committee has to have at least one member of council. And a standing committee, multiple.
Has to have half.
So.
How did we get around
So it's
that?
interesting that there were no members of council on the previous one. So it's just like a ad hoc.
Right.
I'll go back and look, because that was curious. So I'm going back to page 1.
Mm-hmm.
So the sentence that says this approach is like that used by Bowen is right after the reference to UCLUET that used students, but you're not, what you're referring to is the steering committee approach of the other 9 committees.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And I guess I've got mixed feelings about this, as you all know. First of all, the trust policy statement, I mean, do we do something and then find that the trust policy, we spend 2 years doing something, and then the trust policy statement gets adopted in the third year, the early fourth year, and it's totally different from the policy statement that we were dealing with? Is there any requirement at that point to go back and start all over again and make ours consistent with the new policy statement? That's the first question.
Through the chair, it's something we flagged as a potential issue. Like we met with Islands Trust staff to go over some of our comments we had on their latest draft. I mean, I think their timing is looking at adopting it, either late in this term or into the next term. So if council said, well, we don't want to proceed until that point, it would be, essentially it's a 4-year delay. And so what we had discussed with them is the need to, be aware of their latest draft and try to ensure that an OCP that is created is compliant with the current policy statement, which it's required to do, but to be aware of the status of the draft and try to be in compliance with that as well.
Yeah, because I guess I'm thinking there could be some policies that you're compliant with it in doing the new one, but the policy's totally different or not there in the next one. And then I guess my other question is just, I'm leaning more towards the targeted review with maybe a little bit more, certainly not the full new OCP. I mean, people are just getting used to working their way through the new format and the one that we've got now. So tweaking that and, fixing things that don't work, and maybe adding some new sections to the various policies, but not to start all over again. And it's just, how long is this going to take? And what is the implication for anybody that has a rezoning application or anything that they want to get done? Like, we're wanting to do affordable housing. If we had to do an OCP amendment to create something to be built for affordable housing, and my understanding is you can't do all those things while an OCP review is going on. You can't amend sections of the OCP.
I mean, so I was just saying through the chair, I mean, that last point in terms of what to do with new applications that come in, I mean, ultimately it's up to council. There's nothing inherently stopping council from doing an OCP amendment for a one-off application while the OCP review is going in. I think that there would be a scale at which council may say, we don't want to do that. We're not interested in doing a one-off large-scale application while we're doing, we'd rather see that what comes out of the OCP process, but there's nothing inherently to stop council from saying we want to move with this application even while the larger projects are ongoing.
Councillor Fast?
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of.
Councillor Getty first, and then
sure.
Councillor Fast.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me.
Where she goes.
I'm more inclined to, it's been a long time and I don't feel like I'm as familiar with the OCP as I used to be in years past. And I would find it very helpful in this process if we could possibly start with part of this targeted review in terms of identifying what's outdated, what has been supplanted, what is should remain or recommended to be remain unchanged. Maybe some of the highlights in terms of formatting so that it's less cumbersome and easier to organize. And then once we've got that, in my mind, once we have that kind of a analysis of what's happening with this OCP, then we might be better able to choose between comprehensive or a completely new one. And we'd have a chance to look at some of these others to see if, the latest model is something that is actually much more workable. I'm really glad we're getting into this. Some of the other things that are on our plate go away so that we can spend a lot of good time on this. But I would really appreciate having some sort of a more comprehensive idea of what's going on with the existing in terms of, I know that Mayor Leonard, I think you've spend more time on this. Certainly, we're more up to date when we were campaigning in terms of having reviewed it, but I'm not in that place yet, so I would like some help as a first step.
Yeah, so I mean, I do have thoughts on the OCP. I'm very happy to see it come up to us as a council. I'm very happy to see that it will be up for review. I would lean more towards a comprehensive review at this point. I think there are pieces here, or there's a significant opportunity here for Bowen Island to lead, both within the Islands Trust region as well as within the province, on some kind of reorganized OCP. And when I say reorganized, I mean, I think there's some underlying philosophical pieces that we might need to bring in here. So one is that I would love to see a move to an OCP that is more informed by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, given that we are fully encircled by a UNESCO biosphere region. I believe that there's other municipalities in the province that have started looking at building OCPs that address circular economy pieces or even donut economics pieces that can be woven in. Part of this comes from a belief that we are in a transitional period here on Bowen Island. I don't think we have been in the position where we're adequately able to respond to growth. I think the conditions of growth within the region have changed. And as a result, we need to figure out how we're going to play aikido with that growth. So, to be able to pull when it pushes or push when it pulls so that we can adapt to it and that we can move to it fluidly. Another piece that our OCP doesn't explicitly address at all is reconciliation. I believe that needs to be woven within the OCP, given the moves by the province to implement DRIPA. And ultimately, that will be coming down to the municipalities as well. There's more work to do from a climate standpoint. So, while I believe that there's a number of great pieces within the OCP and sections within the OCP that are there and that we can build on existing that exist already, there seems to be the need to reshape it, to figure out what its foundation is going to be, and opportunities to plug that into pieces that other municipalities are doing either in the province, in the country, or even internationally that can turn Bowen Island into a thought leader as we start to address these hard questions of planning, of climate, of reconciliation, of growth, of economies, and of a changing social and ecological landscape. So that's where I'm at with this. I'm happy to see it. I'm willing to entertain any direction from council, but my personal belief from this chair is that we need to look at a comprehensive review of it. And I'll look to second round speakers now. Councillor Fast.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking about I agree that I think a comprehensive, the second option in the options from staff is the way to go, partly because the 12 fundamental goals, the 12 fundamental goals that I spoke about last time, in the previous process when we checked in with the community, they all stood. We tweaked the wording a little bit. We added one about global climate change, and otherwise it was unchanged. So I think we can certainly do that again, whatever people want to do, but just a little bit of evidence there regarding last time. I think the world has changed and is changing, and there's various crises around us. The last time dominant community themes were affordable housing and green oasis and protecting that. This time, I don't know what it might be. I know that the Islands Trust policy statement that we referred to, the things that are focuses of that, they tried to do a targeted review, but it's turning into more comprehensive every time, is reconciliation, as you mentioned, climate change, and housing, affordable housing. So similar, I don't think we should wait for the Islands Trust policy statement. It's been years. They actually received a bunch of money many years ago and gave it back because they didn't have the capacity to do it, or they didn't think it was the right time or whatever. It could still be many years. I think we should just move on And that's my suggestion. Bowen, just flagging for staff, Bowen has very high participation in these processes. And they did in the last update, well, as I think we all know. But in the beginning of this, of the plan, it talks about the process and the numbers of people coming out, and I can provide more info if people need it. I kept all my files. And then finally, there's new online tools too that we might be able to use. It makes sense to go ahead and do the comprehensive review. I think that's a good idea. I've seen a few of the targeted reviews from the Islands Trust side, where they go into an OCP and just update one section or deal with one issue. And then the rest of it is kind of out of date. And, you know, I would sooner have any extra energy we have after we do a comprehensive review. That should give us confidence to actually adjust the land use bylaw to match. It's all about good land use planning, careful. And what didn't happen the last time was an overhaul of the land use bylaw. So anyway, I'm in favor of comprehensive review, and I'll cede the floor. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders, then Councillor Wing.
Couple of very quick comments. Just comparing a targeted review and comprehensive review in similar situations, not with OCPs, but in other lines of work. I've never seen a targeted review not become a comprehensive review in any event. So I think we might as well just say this is what we're doing. That's my opinion on that. The other thing is, though, to what Councillor Getty said, I think it'd be really worthwhile to have kind of some kind of a document prepared that said, here's where we are now. Like, what's based on what's the start? Yes, we can read the and we have read the OCP, but what are the issues and that kind of thing. So just that we have a starting point to go from to develop that comprehensive plan.
Right.
Thanks.
Councillor Wake.
Thank you. I'm in agreement that, I mean, process-wise, it would be nice if we could do a targeted review and get somewhere. But the challenge I see with that is that's going to be putting up a few ideas for change and then asking for the reaction of the community. And if I can remind everybody about the national park discussion, we basically had two sides on that. One giving all the reasons why it would be a disaster if we didn't get a park, and on the other side, all the reasons why it would be a disaster if we did. And I think we really need a process that says, what do we want, not what do we not want. So I think that speaks to a comprehensive review.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, then Councillor Getty.
Well, I'm still leaning to a combination of the two, like starting, I mean, certainly the first thing we need to do, even if a targeted review and a target would be, is the community still in agreement with this 12 fundamental goals? Because if they're not, then it's really changes things. And, you know, we've got sections in it right now, so I wouldn't want to see the sections shuffled around, like leave the basic framework. And there are certainly areas where everybody's going to be happy, and there's other areas that would be larger that maybe need a more fulsome discussion. But so I don't want to go in and just sort of say we're going to look at everything's on the table to change everything, but, you know, let's do it in steps. So anyhow.
And Councillor Morris.
That's Councillor Getty.
And then over to Councillor Getty.
I don't much care what we call it, and I guess I'm blurring all the semantics. So if the first sentence of under targeted review, you remove the word targeted review and just have a review of the existing official community plan, slip that into comprehensive, and then we'll sort out, you know, which ones get more highlighting, I suppose, and more work, more refinement. Some kind of combination. I think that's what maybe Councillor Morris was talking about. I also agree with Councillor Fast. We should not be waiting for the Islands Trust. They're having trouble with their policy guidelines, and you know, it's a huge area with massive differences. And you know, we're a big island compared to many, you know, close to an urban center, and our problems are very different. And they're going to have to come to some sort of reconciliation between all the different problems between all the different islands, and that's a long process, and it's taking a long time. So they've got more resistance to the trust itself, so it's a different process. And I think that once we go through this process ourselves, if there are massive differences and changes to the trust, then once we've been through our process.
Thank you. Councillor Wake.
Just reiterating the importance of what do we want. I think no matter what we do here, it would be good to start with a visioning process, a regional visioning process where we say, okay, how do you see, and there's been talk about, Bowen 2050. So what do you see as Bowen Island in 2050? And let's hear from the entire community on that. Then we can take that and compare it to what we've got. And, work from there. But I just really think we don't want to be arguing about what we don't want.
Yes, and my sense around the table is that even though there's differences of perhaps where this will land, I'm hearing some substantial congruence as to what everybody would like, whether it's, and there might be some semantics around targeted or comprehensive. One of your points around the naming what we want are really salient, and it's been very interesting coming up on a year of being in this chair. I've certainly heard lots of opinions about camping in the last 365 days and there's people that really don't want that, and there's some people that really do. I've heard conversations about types of housing, and some people really want to densify, and other people really don't. I've heard conversations about the types of conservation that we should be implementing on the island, and there's lots of fors and against, and it feels like if I was to take the zeitgeist of the island at this moment, that we're in conversation about our identity and we're in conversation about what we want to be. And the minute that we go and bring that out to the community, because I think this will need some wide and some deep engagement, but the minute that we ask a community, what is it that you would like our island to be, especially knowing where it's come from, is that then everything's on the table. We're going to get opinions about everything, and that's where just going through a text review might not quite work. And if we're going to talk about everything, and given that we've had so many new residents to the island, so since 2011, we've seen a 20% raw increase of population. Many of those don't even know what an OCP is and don't even know what it stands for, particularly people who have moved here during the pandemic. And we saw a lot of those folks come on the island. And as a result, they're not even sure what Bowen Island is. So it feels like, given where we are socially, given where we are ecologically, and given where we are in our own governance, being a young municipality, that the time is right to have a conversation where everything is put on the table. And trying to weave some of the threads in the room, you might get into that process and might realize we don't need to do as much as we thought we did, right? Which would lead to a more targeted review, or we might get out there and we have no idea what we're walking into, and it might necessitate a shredding of the whole thing. My intuition is that it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Unless there's any other discussion, I'll look to council for some kind of disposition. I saw Councillor Saunders with his.
I'd like to move the council direct staff to draft terms of reference for an official community plan steering committee based on the scope of reviews selected by council at the September 21st.
We have to select one, that's the problem.
I thought we just did.
Well, then you better put in the word.
Stop me right there.
Put in the word comprehensive review then.
I'd like to move that council direct staff to draft terms of reference for an official community plan steering committee based on a scope of review for a comprehensive review of the OCP as selected at the council meeting September 25th, 2023.
I'll let the corporate officer parse that and then perhaps get her to read back a
coherent.
Is that the word? I would say massaged version of that motion.
So I just switched around the comprehensive, so I shuffled it to the council direct staff to draft the terms of reference for an official community plan steering committee based on a comprehensive scope of review as selected by council.
Is there a seconder?
This meeting.
Can I ask that the words option 2 in the report or something like that? Because comprehensive can, anyway, it's a small point, but
Would you like a bracket?
yes,
Option 2, yeah.
thank you. Then I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Faust. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and we see you too, Councillor Jurgensen, so that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Exciting times to be on Home Island, especially for a council. Moving on to new business 11.1, Mayor Standing Committee on Infrastructure. So we had,
There's 8.3 and there's section 10.
oh, I missed it. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself here.
Drew's quietly sitting in the back there waiting.
Drew was about to throw a pencil at me. So I'll look to our 8.3, our CAO update here.
Thank you, Mayor. No problem. Just a quick word. I know the mayor's going to touch on our UBCM convention week last week, but just to, we can say from a staff perspective, it was quite productive too. So we'll hear more about that as well. I'll do a quick update on some of the capital projects. Unfortunately, we don't have encouraging news about the Cove Bay drinking water treatment plant. So last update I provided there, I'd identified that there was concerns around readings from a turbidity meter and the hope of the turbidity meter itself. Unfortunately, it's actually the filters that are problematic, not the turbidity meter. And so I guess the silver lining in that is that the filters themselves are warranted, and so the company will be replacing those. It's not all the filters, so it's just some of the filters are problematic, and there's going to be efforts to try. We have 2 filter modules. Each module contains multiple filters. There's going to be an effort to try to reallocate all of the filters that are in operation into one module to get one module online so that we can achieve the drinking water quality that we're striving to achieve while the second module gets brought online. We're told that that could take at least a couple of months. So unfortunately, there's a setback that we were not anticipating for that project. The new Eagle Cliff drinking water project, though, is still advancing, and it is in the initial stages of looking at what the full scope will be for issuing a tender package out to the public for competitive bid process. And the Blue Water project is also advancing as well, but there is some great news about the Blue Water project in terms of availability of water was found from an adjacent development that is currently exploring water availability through 3 wells that they've drilled. And one of the 3 wells is determined to be a very high producing well. I don't have the exact volume yet of that well. At the time when I was informed about it, it was deemed to be an unmeasurable amount, which is great news for the Blue Water community and the whole West Side area for new opportunity for new supply of water. And so we're revisiting the scope of that project as well to sort of look at what the next best path forward is for that project. And we're very happy that it's raining. I know maybe not everybody is, but most of us here are because it is helping replenish the surface water and our groundwater reserves. But it is still a modest amount of rain in comparison to what we truly do need. So conservation is still important to keep in mind because we anticipate that the rain will be stopping later this week and we move into another dry period for a while. So thank you for the rain, but please continue to conserve water. Multi-use path continues, more of a detailed design for the routing option from both from Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane, but also from Charlie's Lane around to Forester Road, which is essentially Grafton Lake. And so you'll see flagging on the road and orange ribbon on the road. And that's what that's all about, is getting more accurate measurements. And then the community center project is moving along well. The vendor did push back the completion date to January, which is getting to be a little more realistic in my eyes. I was skeptical of the earlier fall dates that they had been identifying. We are having a meeting this week where we're going to spend 2 to 3 hours just focusing in on the detailed schedule, because we're at that point in the project where we should be able to get a little more accuracy on the actual completion date. And we'll report back on that. And I did ask why the roof wasn't on, because with the rain starting. And so ultimately the building is pretty much watertight with its membrane on all of the critical places, and all of the critical holes in the roof have some sort of seal on them. But the roofing is scheduled to be going on as early as this week. They're waiting on the gutter to be formed properly. And then once the gutters are formed, they'll start applying the roofing. So hopefully we'll see the roof go on in the next couple of weeks. But a lot of the interior work is starting to take shape. Drywall starting to go up. And I think we're going to see this fall a big flurry of activity, but it'll mostly be inside. And that's it for my capital project.
Thank you. Any questions for the CO? Councillor Getty.
Filters for the water treatment, are there problems in terms of, there were problems earlier in terms of supply? Being able to, wasn't that the cause of one serious delay at some point in terms of?
I don't think it was a filter supply chain issue. I think it was there's
Any problem with this?
There won't be a supply chain issue for the filter replacements themselves. Not that I'm aware of. I think there was a supply chain issue earlier with there's a heating requirement, an inline water heater that was.
Is there any dispute about the warranty?
No.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Sorry, just smiling.
Okay.
I,
Yes.
a few years ago in the previous council term, we ran a pilot project up there, and I thought that's what the main part of it was to see whether those filter tubes were going to work. And but I guess it's a quality control thing.
So ceramic filtration can be also identified as like ultrafiltration. So it's an incredibly good filtration system, and it will remove the majority of particulates of concern and chemicals of concern. And so the challenge with ceramics is that they're also highly sensitive. And so they can become fractured, or you get ultrafine cracks in them that are hard to detect. And that can happen during transport or other things. So while ceramics are an incredibly good filter, they're also very sensitive. And so I don't know exactly what's happened here, why these particular filters are failing, but it's possibly due to ultrafine cracks within the filters themselves. And so.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like I have to ask, just given we're going to be going into Eagle Cliff, going into Blue Water Park. And given the delays that we've seen in Cove Bay, just seems like one issue after another that's pushing the deadline out and out and out. Is there anything, in your view, systemic happening with the Cove Bay project that's just making it so difficult to get online, or is it just a Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events?
I think it's a series of unfortunate events coupled with, and I want to be as respectful as possible, but I do think that we've had some challenges with the technology provider for the filtration system in the Cove Bay project. And there's been some real difficulty in getting to agreement on what solutions look like when we run up against problems with that technology provider. And so I think that some of the delays we're seeing is because of that. And so that's likely isolated to that particular project because of that technology.
Okay.
Historically, communities or large projects can build in some performance metrics into contracts to try to encourage or ensure schedule is maintained. But you always pay a premium for that. And what we're seeing in the current market today is the premium for ensuring schedule adherence is extremely expensive.
Right.
And even the notion of fixed price these days is very, very hard to maintain. The market is so competitive and so escalated that I feel like we're in the back seat, not the driver's seat.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, moving on to the most important report of this afternoon, which I totally didn't forget and skip over last time. Item 10.1, we have adoption of the Heritage Strategic Plan. And I'll call our Island Community Planner, Drew back.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Heritage Strategic Plan Work Program was approved by Council in August 2019 and it proposed a heritage review, community engagement and planning that would carry out over a 12-month period. That period was later extended. BIM's Heritage Commission was named as a project team, municipal staff for the support staff and a consulting firm, Double Luxton and Associates, were involved in the preparation of the plan. The purpose of the Heritage Strategic Plan is to guide BIM's approach to the preservation of heritage property and structures using the legislative tools available to municipal governments. It also identified 3 strategic goals for heritage preservation. The goals that they came up with were, number 1, promote the awareness, interpretation, appreciation, and value of heritage. 2, support the preservation and conservation of important heritage assets and sites on Bowen Island. And 3, to maintain and build the Community Heritage Register. The plan further identifies 9 action strategies to bring those goals about. It also discusses the history of the island over several areas and finally references the Bowen Island Community Heritage Register, which lists and describes 10 properties on Bowen with heritage values that the municipality wants to preserve.
Can you speak slower, please?
Sure, sorry. A draft of the Heritage Strategic Plan was discussed by the Heritage Commission at their meeting of September 6, 2023. The Commission made some minor amendments, then made the motion that the Heritage Commission recommend that Council approve the 2023 to 2033 Heritage Strategic Plan as presented and amended at the September 6, 2023 meeting of the Bowen Island Heritage Commission. Likewise, staff recommends that Council approves the 2023 to 2033 Heritage Strategic Plan.
Thank you. Any questions for the planner? Councillor Morris.
In the plan itself, the first strategy, it says identify the important historical stories on Bowen Island, et cetera. And I have absolutely no problem with that being done, but do they have to identify them or is there a role to ensure that they are identified? Because there's 2 organizations that do a lot of heritage work on the island. Plus, community citizens. So I'd be more comfortable with the words ensure that the important historic are identified.
Oh.
So I don't know if anybody else, just because this is their plan. And so I don't want them duplicating work that's already been done. So, and that's my first comment. My second was, and I am stuck on this one, design and install signage and interpretive materials. That costs money. So I think we have to have a subject to budget approval or budget availability in there for that one. So I would move that strategy action 4 be amended to insert the words subject to annual budget approval. at the end.
Would you want to do that now, or would it make sense just to table that for a minute until we get all the
Yeah,
other?
that's fine. I just want to put that on the table, that definitely needs to be there for number 4.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So we'll look at the more fine tune, any amendments to this document, sort of after general comments and questions have been answered by council. And then the speakers list, I see Councillor Getty, then Councillor Fast.
I think this as a heritage strategic plan, that this is for the community to agree with the goals and the action steps. It's always going to be subject to budget and council approval. I don't know that this is not the work plan for the Heritage Commission. This is the strategic plan for the community, and it's all encompassing. Is my take of it. So if the goal is to promote awareness, interpretation, appreciation, and value, those are ways of doing it. And then the second goal is to support preservation and conservation, and those are ways of doing that. And the only problem that I have with passing this and agreeing to it as it stands is that there's a bit of a gaping hole at the back, at the very end, where the Snow Cove design guidelines. And it's highlighted in my copy of this to be added. And I went back through the, the Advisory Design Committee. And
Design panel.
I can't find an update of the design guidelines. I would think that that is really important for this strategic plan and fundamental, if nothing else, in terms of making sure that heritage is part of those, because so much of it is in Snow Cove, not all of it, but so much. And I think that if that is still in the works, that somehow or other, this be amended and there be some recognition or recommendation that whatever the problem is with the design guidelines, that gets solved sooner rather than later. So I find that to be quite a significant gaping hole. I would also like, and I don't see in here, one of the problems that I think has happened with the process of what's going on with the restoration in Davies River is because there's no link between properties that get listed on the register and that being mentioned or possibly highlighted or a specific reference to, if anything comes up that's an application with respect to any of those properties, that comes back to the Heritage Commission for comments. And I think that was missed with Davis Orchard Cottages, and I think that that's something that can be and should be at least a reference so that council is twigged to the planners are twigged to the fact that it has heritage significance, and then they recommend that it be referred to the Heritage Commission for comment, because that didn't happen with Davies Orchard, and I think that's partly why we're in the bit of a mess that I think we're in now. So those would be my comments. I would almost like to table this. I think that it's all well thought out, and they've done an enormous amount of work in terms of all of the details, and I don't think that it's going to hinder the work that they are doing. They've got their work plan, but I think that we need to sort out the Snow Cove design guidelines.
Councillor Fast?
Thank you. Yeah, I was on the advisory design panel last term, and as I recall, we got up to about 90% complete of the update, and I'm wondering if somebody on staff can tell me where it's at?
Through the chair, the Snow Cove Design Guideline was a project in the former term, council term's island plan. In the 2022 island plan session, council removed it from the list of active projects to complete that term. So it is about 90%, and it was on my list of items to bring up with council at your October strategic planning session. Yeah.
Thank you. And because I think it's going to be great, and it's going to fit in here really nicely, and but I don't have a problem with putting that holding thing in there, because the rest of this is also important. It reminds me of the cultural master plan when that came forward back it may have even been in the first days of the municipality, as I recall, quite early. Anyway, it led to the Arts Commission and it led to the library, and many groups used it as a way to work together. So I'm happy to see this. I have another question. I see the word Indigenous in here a number of times. Was the consultant or staff, has there been, was Squamish Nation involved in any way? Was there a way to get any input from them?
It's really difficult to answer that. It's basically this plan was worked on for so long. There were 3 different staff members that were working on it at a later stage. I don't know offhand. I think I just have to go through their notes and find out how.
That's okay. If there's no answer, I'm happy to see the words Indigenous in here under that heritage heading. And to me, this is like the first step. And I'm sure as reconciliation proceeds and all these things, there may be more opportunities to flesh out some parts of this from the Snug Cove guidelines to the consulting part. And I think over the years, so many people have worked on this, and I've been part of some of the other groups over the past 20 some years or more. And I'm happy to see this, and I would like to approve it. I'm in favor of the staff resolution that's here, but if other people want to say something, I won't move it now.
Okay. Any other comments before we start getting to motions of disposition? So I think probably the easiest one to work through first is Councillor Morse's text amendment of subject to budgetary resources.
Budget approval,
Budget approval.
annual budget approval.
And where would you like to insert that? Councillor Morse?
Just right after strategy action 4, design and install signage and interpretive materials subject to annual budget approval.
Okay. Is there a second for that amendment? I'll second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Fast.
It seems to me to sort of confuse things, because is this the heritage plan just for the Heritage Commission that we provide some funding and support for? Or is this for the whole community? Because I wouldn't want to discourage any of the groups referred to in here, or any future groups or neighborhoods or anybody from looking at this and going, oh, here's a community plan, and then stumbling over that piece. Sometimes people donate that kind of work, for example. A group might do that, or I just hesitate to single out one piece with a limitation like an annual budget amount when I think this is a plan for the whole community. It's not the work plan of that committee, right? So I think these are general goals, and under broad headings like education, and there's various the various signs and guides that have been put out to date have not been put out by this group. They've been put out by other groups. So I don't, with money that they've raised or volunteers and projects that they've pulled together. And I do see that there's also strategy number 7, which says identify funding resources to assist both public and private owners in heritage preservation and conservation. So, sorry?
That's for their buildings and their assets.
Well,
Or this is the signages, and we're
I think education goals should be general, and I would hate to limit any particular part of this plan with a budget line item that we don't even have yet. I think that kind of, well, anyway, I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment?
I get to respond, do I not?
In a material way, you certainly do.
So the very second sentence on the executive summary says Bowen Island municipality has not had an established heritage protection plan, which made me think that this was a Bowen Island municipality plan that had been developed to help the community recognize their heritage. And when you have a blanket statement to design and install signage, a committee could read that to mean we've got an open-ended budget to do that.
This addresses two questions here. A similar question that I think has been raised both by Councillor Fast and Councillor Morse, and maybe there's staff can comment on the distinction between the Heritage Commission's work plan versus this as a guiding strategy document.
Yeah, I would agree that's, a guiding strategy document for the whole community, not a work plan for the community, the commission.
Councillor Getty?
There's several items here that if we want to get into whether or not there's an approved budget. The development enhanced online presence would be costly. Hold a symposium with island heritage groups would cost something. Designing and installing signage would possibly cost something if it was paid for by the municipality. Hiring outside consultants. So all of this is just goals and strategies. And if there's going to be actual work and tasks identified and prioritized, then you're going to have to ask for a budget. So it's a general understanding. This isn't saying that there's unlimited funds available for any of this.
Similar to Translate's 10-year priorities that are all unfunded presently.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
But it is a good point raised by Councillor Morse, but it is also the other points raised are also valid too. And the municipality has many plans that commits the municipality to many things, but it's always subject to budget appropriation, and that is an annual process. And so I think it is important to be aware that that this is a Bowen Island municipality endorsed plan, and council, if council endorses it, is endorsing the actions, but for clarity, it doesn't give it budget appropriation. So
That's made clear to the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the commission.
So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. It seems like there's no more first round speakers. So all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Opposed, raise your hand, say nay. That's defeated unanimously.
Well, I'm relying on the CAO that they're gonna tell them they don't have any money and they've got to get council's approval to do it.
Okay.
And if he doesn't, I will.
Councillor Fast.
Then I'd like to move the staff recommended motion here. I move that council approve the 2023-2033 Heritage Strategic Plan as presented and amended at the September 26th, 2023 meeting of the Bowen Island Heritage Commission.
Okay, been moved. For a second. Second by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that carries. Councillor Getty opposed.
And Councillor Saunders.
And Councillor Saunders opposed.
So will this get posted on plans and so forth on the website? I don't remember seeing the heritage plan there before. Reports and publications.
I see the planner with this.
Just through the chair, yes, it will be posted online, just looking to update the formatting to match other municipal plans, and then we will post it online.
Okay, that concludes reports of committees. New business 11.1, Mayor Standing Committee on Infrastructure. A verbal report on this one. So some comments on this one, as I know that there was some discussion amongst council by email earlier today. So this is an item that doesn't need a resolution, although I did want to speak to it as a matter of keeping council and community informed. And what this boils down to is we know that our basic infrastructure, whether it's roads, culverts, water, sewer systems, or new buildings like the community center or future buildings like the public works yard, these projects represent the greatest financial impact to our community and could potentially represent the largest financial threat to our community. And presently, we don't have a centralized committee to provide information or recommendation to council on an issue that's going to cost Bowen Islanders tens of millions of dollars in the coming year. We're just at the start of our asset management planning and without a great idea of what's even in the ground or what the final numbers are going to be in terms of cost to upgrade and maintain it. We know that our water systems are going to take millions of dollars to deal with. We know that the sewer in Snug Cove is going to take millions more. The same is with our crumbling works yard, our roads, our stress culverts. And I feel like I'm out in the community trying to drum on this issue, but I can't understate the seriousness of this issue for a small community of 4,200 and what the financial impact will potentially mean for everyone across the island. So that's why today I'm announcing the creation of a mayor's standing committee on infrastructure and asset management. And these term limited committees are available to BC mayors under the community charter for signature issues. And the mayor appoints council and community members to these committees, defines their mandate. And I believe that this move and foregrounding it in this way is going to bring attention to the infrastructure discussion in a way that hasn't quite been yet. We've seen this in our budget conversations so far. We see this in nearly every report that we get from our Public Works Department. But it's time to put this issue on the front burner and start dealing with it head on so that we can mitigate the impacts that it's going to have in the future. So for now, I'm going to be starting small. I've asked Councillor Wake and Councillor Saunders to participate in this committee. Councillor Wake, with his previous experience on Whistler's Council and a former general manager of a housing authority, understands infrastructure planning that's necessary to build out sustainable housing in a small tourist-based community. Councillor Saunders has experience in small communities across the country and in consulting across North America on infrastructure security, and understands the alarm that Bowen's present situation creates. From the community, I'm going to be sourcing technical expertise in engineering, architecture, and construction. And as a start, I believe that this combination of electeds and community on this small scale is going to be of invaluable resource to myself as mayor, as well as our council as we start wrestling with what's coming up. Public Works Yard, massive road improvements, massive culvert improvements, huge water system projects and the like. With that, I'll end here. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments. I'll start with Councillor Morse and then Councillor Getty.
So you only appointing 2 members to this committee, or are you the third member?
I'm the third member.
So that means you're only going to be able to use 3 professionals with expertise, given the broad range of our, which I think is, I think an infrastructure committee is a great idea. The previous one we had did a lot of work, but it was more than 3 people. And it was a select committee, and I think it should be a select committee.
Thank you. Councillor Getty?
I read through the minutes of the last committee that was, I guess, about 10 years ago now. The thing that jumped out was towards the end of their meetings, they were frustrated because there were some other projects that came up that weren't cross-referenced. And I think that with this, the scope of the projects that you've been talking about, the amount of money that's involved, that falls into place with the ombudsperson's recommendations in terms of, and then our study that has come out of that in terms of whether or not the whole community should be responsible for some of these infrastructure costs. And if so, how? So I think that not only figuring out the size and scope and possibly some best practices, but also making sure that we're cross-referencing. Members of the council will know when things are coming up and get the people from the community that have some expertise that are helping with this. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think that, good, not oversight, but, an analysis and some understanding and some way of helping us through what's going to be a very expensive future is going to be helpful. But I think, I had a conversation this weekend with my nephew who's involved with large construction projects in Calgary. And he was asking me some questions that I want to ask privately in terms of the process of organizing and following big projects. But I think that this is going to be very, very helpful. But I also want to make sure that we don't unnecessarily limit the scope of these people, that they can feed each other in other communities.
Absolutely, and that's the intent. We know that infrastructure will have significant overlap with multiple committees, and also we'll need to assess information, get it to council quickly. So I think previously there's been mayor's committees that have predominantly operated and closed. That's not the intention of this one. It's really to plug into council and really start bringing awareness to an infrastructure deficit that hasn't adequately been dealt with. And I don't think the community fully understands the alarm of in the coming years as we look to fund it. So the intention certainly isn't to create an offshoot of council that has any kind of executive authority. It's mostly to start getting expertise around the table. It may turn into a select committee. It may morph into something else. But right now we don't have anything. And in the interest of getting something up and running quickly and some expertise around the table that we can start looking at some of these issues, this is where I'd like to start. Councillor Fest?
I think it's a good idea. I hope it doesn't stray into operational stuff, but you just said that you weren't going to go in that directional sort of side of things. And let me know if I can help with the green infrastructure side of things, because I have been looking at keeping an eye on that in terms of we can save money by keeping this hillside or whatever, or letting the water infiltrate here. And that kind of thing. So let me know if I can help.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, moving on to 11.2, update on the Union of BC Municipalities Conference. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I still feel like I'm in the conference. It was such an intense week-long experience of from breakfast early in the morning through till receptions at night, and then all kinds of meetings with ministers and staff and other politicians about what's happening. It was a very rich environment to have discussion in and to connect with our colleagues in and to connect with senior government. We did have many meetings we met with the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship. We met with Jobs and Economic Development, Environment and Climate Change Strategy, Emergency Management. So the list just goes on. And ultimately, the report back to the community is a lot of positive discussion, not a lot in terms of commitment. So as council moves forward into another round of strategic planning towards the end of October, our job is going to be to whittle down out of the themes that we identified last year, what is it that we actually want to do and what is it that we actually want to accomplish at an intergovernmental level? And what does that funding look like? So when we meet later next month, council, I believe the onus is going to be us to sit around the table and start getting really strategic in terms of nuts and bolts asks that we want to hammer our regional and provincial and federal partners with over the next 3 years so that we can find solutions to some of these pieces, whether it's the Snug Cove sewer system, whether it's Crown land designations on the island, whether it's building out more funding and infrastructure for climate response and emergency readiness. These are all examples of where we can go in. But what I will say, after being in a full year of this role and even interacting with some of my colleagues at UBCM, is that, and interacting with our council at UBCM throughout all these meetings, is that we have a fantastic council. We have a council that is getting along. We have a council that is collegial. We disagree respectfully. That those disagreements have added to my knowledge, and I think have ultimately added to richer conversations. They've informed the directions that we're going in. And when I compare ourselves to other municipalities in the province, we are functioning really, really well. And we are moving forward really, really well. And I just wanted to publicly thank council for that, because it takes all of the individuals around the table to make that happen, as well as our staff team here. But I think we're well positioned in these next 3 years to build out our asks and to work collaboratively and in a coordinated way to ensure that Bowen Island's getting the attention that it deserves from our other levels of government and as a thought leader in the province. So thank you. Yes, Councillor Getty.
I also want to thank Liam. So I think that I came to realize that all of your connections and all of your work that you've done with the province before was incredibly helpful, both in terms of the report and I think in terms of a lot of the content. So when we didn't have the answers, and it was like, maybe our CAO can answer that. And you actually jumped in on several occasions to incredibly helpful. So I think that I was surprised at the reaction that we got from many people in terms of, holy cow, you guys work well together. You're almost friends. It's something really unusual. And, it was, I thought it was, for me, as a first experience, it was intense and it was exhausting and it was really, really interesting. Thank you. I thought I didn't do a presentation and I'm glad I didn't, but I'm really glad that all of you did so well. I didn't want to have those questions that popped up.
I commented to the municipal affairs staff that it was, that watching Liam at that conference was like putting a fish back in an aquarium. Like, man, could he swim. So thank you for all the work that you did there.
Thank you.
I'll open the floor. Any other councillors or even maybe our CAO want to make any comments about UBCM?
Just one general comment. I think one of your earlier statements was astute in that there was lots of productive meetings, but there were very little, if any, commitments. And I think that's something for council to recognize, that you don't get commitments at convention. It's about planting seeds and making connections and relationships. And it's very unlikely that you'll ever get a minister to commit to something there. So I think we all did a fantastic job at demonstrating our level of engagement with the community and with the issues that are relevant to this government as well. And so I think that will take us a long way.
Now our job is to water those seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to updates on Metro Vancouver business. So there is nothing happened in the last 2 weeks. There is a board meeting at the end of this week, as well as a regional parks committee meeting coming up October 4th. So those will likely have Bowen Island issues on the agenda. Whether those are in open or closed, I'm not entirely sure yet, but we will see. TransLink is also firing up, so everything's been kind of backstopped with UBCM. Upcoming issues on TransLink are going to be prioritization of bus rapid transit across the region. So there's various communities making their bids and pitches to get bus rapid transit, whether we're looking at lines that go from Metrotown to Park Royal or from Langley to Maple Ridge. There's a lot happening there. As well, TransLink is really committed, for those that did catch the media announcement at UBCM, really shaking the tree for more funding from our provincial and federal counterparts, given that transit hasn't quite rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, although interestingly, Vancouver is doing far, far better than anybody else in the country. So Vancouver's use of transit is overperforming anywhere else in the country. But with an ambitious 10-year priorities plan and Transit 2050, there's lots that needs funding, and that's what that body is chasing now. Unless there's any questions, I'll move on to update on Islands Trust business. Councilor Morris.
The interesting thing I learned at the reception, which was sponsored by Rogers, but also jointly sponsored by TransLink. And Rogers commented there that they've got Wi-Fi on all the long-range rapid transit, rapid buses, which I thought was really neat, which then raises the question as to how come BC Ferries can't manage to do it on their ferry?
Right. Couple of reasons.
BC Ferries did have it, and then they pulled it back from complaints.
Oh, that's because it kept cutting out all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will look to our Islands trustees for whoever wishes to go first.
Crocodile starts tomorrow to get over to Pender to our next quarterly meeting.
Right.
So
The agendas are posted online and anybody can Zoom in or watch it on live stream if you're excited about that kind of thing. There's going to be a good discussion. My colleague here, Judy, is going to be leading one of the sessions Anyway, it'll be about sort of revisiting the mandate. What are the local amenities that we're supposed to preserve and protect? What does it mean? And so that it's part of our strategic planning at that table, so that Trust Council, the 26 of us, can begin to move hopefully in one direction together. And so it's a couple of days on Panther Judy's driving. This time.
Thank you. And I'll also note that we had some great interactions with the Islands Trust during UBCM. So the Islands Trust hosts a breakfast every year at UBCM, which we attended, and it was fantastic to begin to meet some of those folks. I had numerous conversations and coffee dates and sat with the Trust Chair, Peter Luckham, at the gala dinner, and we feel very much aligned. There are differences between Bowen Island Municipality and the Islands Trust, obviously, but I think there's a lot of places to cooperate and collaborate on as both the Islands Trust figures out what it's becoming out of its initial mandate from the 1970s and is looking to figure out its role in this brave new world, as well as Bowen Island Municipality, especially now that we have a full municipal infrastructure behind us to be able to lead within the Trust region. We had an informal meeting with the Trust Executive Committee as well over cocktails and coffee, which was lovely. And it just felt really warm to be in the presence of fellow Islanders. So there's differences across all of the islands, but ultimately I think what does connect us is this sense of where we are and where we live and how privileged we are to be on a Gulf island. So it was lovely to interact with those folks. And with that, our information items were received on the consent agenda. Question period. So question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question relating to an item discussed at the meeting. Are there any members of the public here or online that would like to ask a question?
I think I have a question, but I wrote it down somewhere. First of all, it was regarding the...
Would you be able to come up to the front here, Madame?
Regarding the heritage preservation, I have not followed up as it went around, but the suggestion from my husband and I is that special trees have to be included in the listing, not just building, because we do have some very specific special trees that are worth preserving, and so there should be some covenant on them. And then the discussion around the heritage list. I was looking at the heritage preservation in New Zealand, of all things, and they have a problem. They don't have a problem. Whether and they do have preserved trees that are also very important, but they have made a list in, let's say, 2012 or whatever it was. But a lot of things have not been listed. So the wording of their statement is that whether you're on the list or not on the list, if the building or the tree are important, they have to be considered to be on the list and a review has to be made. So, whether you're listed or not listed, there should be a review when somebody considers it important. And then to the mayor, where I go down to the mayor, something. First to Leah, regarding water, surface water, it rains, and the surface water stops running in the creeks in the spring when the leaves come up because the trees need water to create leaves. So that's the element when it stops running in the creeks. Now, water to be in the ground, now hold on to your hat. It takes 5 centimeters a year to go down and accumulate. So if you're pumping everything from your groundwater, when are you going to replenish it? So the replenishment of groundwater is an important factor. So in Blue Water, you said that there is a new well with high producing fractures. How long will it last? That should also be considered. Now to the mayor.
So just to clarify, it's 2 questions per speaker. So I'm gonna refer those 2 questions out. So the first question was around, and I'll look to staff as to whether and how trees or natural assets can be cataloged as part of a heritage register. So I'll get to Leonard to answer that question.
I mean, I would say first, some quick internet research shows that some places do list heritage trees. And then strategy 9 of this heritage tree plan is about developing a procedure for public nomination of additional sites for the heritage register. So I think that would be something the Heritage Commission would be working on, is how to essentially let people nominate new sites and consider new sites so that the heritage register isn't a static list that was adopted at one point and henceforth shall remain untouched, but that it be a living document that people can nominate.
As it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then the second question was around, sounded like,
Water.
yeah, recharge for water. Were there any comments?
Oh, I would agree with you 100%. And groundwater is a bit of a mysterious thing that we pretend to understand. And so,
And I think it will, to my, just to, in our neighborhood, someone is talking about tiny homes. If you're going to have 40 tiny homes with 60 people, where is the water going to come from? Even if the well on the day that they tested will probably have enough, but how long would that last for? And I think that is also an important question. And now to the mayor, regarding commitment. Bob Ray, our ambassador to the United Nations, had a very nice talk on last Friday, on the current, and he really stresses that in order to have commitment, you have to have courage, and courage does not come easily. That's all I have to say.
Oh, is there a question there?
No, there's no question. Comment.
Oh, great.
Comment.
Thank you.
Courage. Where is your courage?
My courage.
You can talk about all kinds of things, but where is the courage to do it?
Right. Well, and what I would offer, and this is what I was talking to my colleagues about at UBCM, is that there's courage to make big moves, and part of what will lead Bowen Island to be successful is also getting specific on the moves that it wants to make. And we saw in the last year, so being 4 out of 7 new council members, a lot of this last year has been getting up to speed, working together. We've had significant issues that we've had to deal with that were left over from the previous term. It feels like we're just starting to get to the place where, okay, now as the 2022 to 2026 council, we get to define our own path forward. And this is a good time to do it. We've cut our teeth on some, big and semi-ridiculous issues at times so far, and we've learned who the players are, we've learned who our allies are, we've learned where to go for specific things. And our job over this next year is going to be getting specific so that we can deploy the blade of courage with some sharpness and get at what it is that we need to get at and what it is that we want to do as a community. And some of that courage will come in standing up for principles that are ultimately going to be enshrined in our new OCP document. It's going to be standing up for what Bowen is and what it isn't, and making some declarative statements as to that with the help of the community. And then getting courageous about asking what we need to ask for and getting clarity on plans for things like sewage treatment, which we have no idea how we're going to pay for it. Our roads deficit, which we have no idea how we're going to pay for. Water systems, which we have no idea how we're going to pay for. And that's going to involve getting in some rooms and cornering some folks and, being courageous with those asks too. So that's sort of how I would frame that as it is.
And therefore, I think that your committee on structure is very important.
Yeah.
It was very fuzzy-wuzzy until now.
Right. Okay. Counselor Getty, and then thank you very much, Benham. And then I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Yes, moved by Counselor Getty, seconded by Counselor Sonder. I can always rely on you guys for that one. All right.
That's a lot of courage.
Take the heat.
So, the,